The workshop smelled of oil, metal, and rain-soaked dust. Outside, the storm had not stopped for 3 nights, hammering the rusted rooftops of the lower districts. Most people had retreated to shelters or collapsed buildings, but in the forgotten corners of this industrial graveyard, one stubborn light flickered in defiance of the darkness. It came not from the power grid, those lines had died years ago, but from a single flashlight, weak and trembling, clenched between the teeth of a young mechanic. His hands were covered in grease, nails chipped, knuckles scarred from countless burns. The boy's name was Kyle, and though no one in the city knew him, the way he bent over shattered engines made him look like he was studying scripture. Every bolt, every wire, every fractured gear was holy text to him. The flashlight beam trembled as he muttered, tightening a screw with the precision of a surgeon. "Come on. Hold just a little longer," Kyle whispered, wiping sweat from his brow. The machine before him was an old atmospheric filter, something the upper districts had discarded decades ago. It was useless junk to most, but to Kyle it was a chance to bring cleaner air to the children in the tunnels below. If he could fix it, maybe they wouldn't have to cough blood every winter. The storm roared, wind battering the thin steel walls of his workshop, and then a knock. It was faint at first, hesitant, almost drowned by thunder. Kyle froze. Nobody ever came here, not unless they were desperate or dangerous. He spat the flashlight into his palm, grabbed a wrench, and stepped toward the door. The knock came again, this time firmer. Kyle squinted. Who the hell knocks during a storm? He unlatched the door. Standing there, dripping rain and mud, was a figure cloaked in grey. A hood shadowed the stranger's face, but even soaked as she was, Kyle noticed the way her stance betrayed her. Too straight, too deliberate. This was not the posture of a beggar. "I need shelter," the figure said softly. Her voice was low, commanding, yet trembling with exhaustion. Kyle narrowed his eyes. Something in that voice stirred an unease inside him. But then he saw her. Hands scraped, bleeding, calloused in ways that seemed both real and forced. "You're either lost or stupid," Kyle muttered, stepping aside. "But fine, don't touch anything." The cloaked stranger entered, water dripping onto the floor. For a moment, Kyle returned to his machine, but his eyes kept flicking toward her. She removed her hood just slightly. Pale skin, eyes that seemed too sharp, too aware. Her hair clung to her face, darkened by rain. Kyle frowned. He'd seen nobles before, brief glimpses when their airships flew overhead. This woman carried herself like one of them. But what was a noble doing here? In his workshop, surrounded by rust and broken dreams? The woman scanned the room with eyes that missed nothing. The broken machines stacked like corpses, the shelves of scavenged tools, the small cot shoved in the corner. "You live here?" she asked quietly. Kyle snorted. "What gave it away? The bed or the fact that you're standing in it?" For the briefest second, the stranger's lips twitched into something like amusement, but it was gone just as quickly. Kyle tightened a wire and ignored her, or tried to, because he could feel it, the weight of her gaze on him. Finally, he snapped. "If you've come to rob me, get it over with. I don't have credits. If you've come to kill me, well, you're wasting your time. I'm not important enough." The woman tilted her head. "Not important? Nope. Just a mechanic. Fix things nobody cares about. Keep people alive a little longer. That's all." Silence. Then she stepped forward, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Sometimes keeping people alive is the most important thing of all." Kyle looked up sharply. The way she said it, it wasn't casual, it was personal. For the first time, he really looked at her, and something inside him stirred, though he didn't understand why. Hours passed. The storm raged outside, but inside, the workshop time seemed to slow. Kyle worked on his filter, while the cloaked woman sat quietly, occasionally asking questions that felt too intelligent for a passerby. Why repair that instead of building something new? Because building new needs parts I'll never afford. Why bother at all? The upper districts will never share the air they breathe. Kyle's jaw tightened. Because down here, if I don't fix it, no one will. The woman studied him silently. Her chest rose and fell, as if she wanted to say something more, but didn't. Finally, exhaustion overcame her. She leaned against the wall, eyes fluttering shut. For a moment, the hard edges of her face softened. Vulnerability peeked through the armor of control. Kyle stared at her. Something didn't fit. Her cloak was worn, but the fabric beneath, when the stormlight hit it just right, was far too fine for a drifter. Her hands had scars, yes, but also bore the faint trace of rings recently removed. And then Kyle noticed something else. A small pendant tucked beneath her collar, glinting in the dim light. An insignia. His stomach dropped. He knew that symbol. Everyone in the Empire did. It was the crest of the Imperial family. The blood in his veins turned to ice. "What the hell are you doing here?" he whispered. The woman's eyes opened, sharp, alert. No trace of drowsiness now. "You saw it," she murmured. Kyle gripped his wrench tighter. "You're—" "Yes," she interrupted, standing tall. Her cloak slipped from her shoulders, revealing garments fine yet dirtied, torn by flight. "I am Selene, First Empress of the Celestial Throne." Thunder cracked. The workshop seemed to shrink around them. Kale staggered back. "No, impossible. What are you doing in the lower districts? Why come here?" Her eyes glimmered, not with pride, but with something far more fragile. "Because the empire I rule has turned against me," she whispered, "and because I had nowhere else to go." Silence pressed heavy between them. Kyle's mind reeled. An empress, in his workshop, asking for shelter like a beggar. "If anyone found out, leave," Kyle hissed, panic sparking in his chest. "If the guards see you here, if anyone sees you, they'll burn this place down. They'll kill me just for breathing the same air as you." Selene's voice cut sharp. "If you send me away, they'll kill me before dawn." Kyle froze. The storm outside raged louder, rattling the walls. In that moment, the boy with a wrench and the woman with a crown stood staring at each other. Both trapped, both hunted, both in more danger than they could admit. And though neither could explain it, fate had bound them together on this storm-drenched night. The storm had quieted, but the silence it left behind was heavier than thunder. The workshop felt too small now, its walls closing in with the weight of a secret Kyle never wanted. The Empress, here, in his home. Kyle paced the floor, wrench clutched in his hand, like it might shield him from the impossible truth standing a few feet away. His heart thudded in his ears. "This is insane," he muttered under his breath. "This can't be real." Selene watched him, her gaze sharp yet steady. She stood with a posture that carried centuries of authority, but her cloak, torn, muddy, stripped of insignia, was a reminder that power was fragile, fleeting. "It is real," she said softly. "I wish it were not, but—" She hesitated, her eyes darkening. "The throne no longer belongs to me." Kyle froze. His chest tightened. He wanted to laugh, to call it madness, but deep down he knew. The insignia, her voice, the steel in her bearing, it was too perfect to be a lie. "Why me?" Kyle demanded, his voice rising. "Why come here, out of all the districts, out of all the people? You show up in my workshop?" Selene's eyes locked on him, unblinking. "Because you opened the door." The simplicity of it struck Kyle harder than any thunderclap. He opened his mouth to argue, but found no words. Selene stepped closer, lowering her voice. "If you wish, me gone, I will leave. But you know what will happen. They are hunting me, they will not stop, and if I fall into their hands, the Empire itself will burn." Her words vibrated with conviction, with the weight of truths Kyle couldn't see. He swallowed hard, trying to steady the chaos inside him. "Who's hunting you?" he finally asked. Selena's lips pressed into a thin line. For a moment she looked older, wearier. "The Council, my own advisors, those who once swore loyalty. They call it preservation, an empire free of weakness." Her voice shook just slightly. "They call me that weakness." Kyle blinked. His grip on the wrench loosened. "You're saying they want you dead?" Her eyes flickered with pain, quickly masked. "Not just dead, erased, forgotten. They mean to crown another in my place, a puppet, easily controlled. One who will rule with chains and cruelty. If they succeed, the people will suffer beyond what you already endure." Kyle felt the truth in her words. though he wanted to resist it. He had lived his whole life under the shadow of the empire, hungry, forgotten, scavenging scraps while nobles feasted in towers. What difference did it make who sat on the throne? And yet, as he looked at her, drenched, scarred, stripped of her crown, he saw not an untouchable ruler, but a woman, fragile, mortal, fighting not only for her survival, but for something greater. Kyle exhaled sharply, rubbing his temples. "This is madness. You shouldn't be here. You'll bring death down on both of us." Celine's gaze softened. "Perhaps, but if I die alone, the empire falls alone. If I die here..." She paused, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Then maybe someone will remember I was more than a crown." The silence after her words was deafening. For the first time, Kyle saw her not as the empress, not as the symbol burned into banners and coins, but as a human being. A woman cast out by her own, and against every instinct screaming in his skull, Kyle found himself saying, "You can stay for now." The hours that followed blurred into one another. Kyle returned to his broken filter, hands moving out of habit, but his mind spun in circles. Celine, true to her word, remained quiet. She sat by the wall, cloak wrapped around her, but her eyes never stopped watching. Him, the machines, the storm beyond the steel walls. At one point, Kyle caught her tracing something invisible against her palm, patterns, maybe words, a habit of someone used to signing decrees, perhaps. It was strange seeing such a person stripped of ceremony. "You ever fix something that didn't want to be fixed?" Kyle asked suddenly, surprising even himself. Selene blinked, caught off guard. "Every day," she said quietly. He snorted. "What could an empress possibly need to fix?" Her eyes met his, steady as stone. "An empire," Kyle stilled. He had no answer for that. As dawn approached, the storm faded to a cold drizzle. Kyle opened the door, letting in a sliver of gray light. The city stretched before them, crumbling towers, smoke rising from distant fires, streets slick with rain. Selene stepped beside him, her hood drawn low. "So this is where they left you?" Kyle's jaw clenched. "They didn't leave us, they abandoned us." Her voice was almost a whisper. "And yet you still fight to keep people alive." He glanced at her. "What about you? Why fight? You could have fled the stars, vanished, lived free, but you're here, dragging me into your mess." Celine's eyes darkened, but not with anger, with memory. "Because I swore an oath not to the council, not to the throne, to the people, and I will not abandon them, even if they believe I already have." Her words carried a raw honesty. That struck Kyle deep. For the first time, he saw something in her that no banners or speeches had ever shown. Not power, not glory, but resolve, and maybe, just maybe, trust. But trust is fragile, and fate is cruel. That night, as Kyle prepared his cot, a faint hum cut through the quiet. At first, he thought it was the storm returning. Then he realized no storm hummed like that. Selene's head snapped up. Her eyes widened in horror. "Drones!" Kyle's stomach dropped. He rushed to the door. In the distance, lights glowed against the dark sky, hovering, searching. "They've found me," Selene whispered. Kyle turned to her, panic rising. "You brought them here." Her face was pale, stricken, but her voice held steel. "Then we run." Kyle's heart hammered. He had never run from the Empire before. He had hidden, scavenged, endured. But now, with her at his side, the humming grew louder, closer. Selene gripped his arm, her touch firm, grounding. "You have a choice, Kyle. Stay here and they will kill you, or come with me and live." His breath caught. Every instinct told him to let go, to shove her out into the rain, to save himself. But as he looked into her eyes, he saw not the Empress, not a crown, but a woman who had nothing left but defiance. And to his own disbelief, Kyle whispered, "Then let's run." The rain swallowed them as they slipped into the shadows of the lower districts. The hum of drones grew louder behind them, beams of light cutting through the ruins. Kyle had no idea where they were going, no idea if survival was even possible. But for the first time in his life, he wasn't running away. He was running with someone who carried a crown, someone who carried hope, someone who against all odds trusted him, and Kyle, against all reason, found himself trusting her too. The rain never forgave the lower districts. It clung to the streets, dripped from broken cables, pooled in the skeletons of fallen towers. Every shadow carried danger, every flicker of light a threat. Kale pulled Selena into a narrow passage between two leaning walls, chest heaving, lungs burning. The drone hum echoed through the night, metallic and merciless, scanning alleys with piercing beams. "Keep low," Kyle whispered, though his voice was barely air. His hands shook as he pulled a tarp of rusted mesh over them. Selene crouched beside him, hood drawn, but her breathing was steady. Too steady, like she'd lived 100 nights just like this one. The drone lights passed, a moment of silence. Then the sound grew fainter. Kyle dared to breathe, but Selene didn't relax. Her eyes narrowed, fixed on the sky. "They won't." "Stop." Kyle almost laughed, but it came out bitter. "No one in the lower districts ever does." They moved again, weaving through collapsed bridges and shattered corridors. Kyle knew these paths better than most. Ratways carved by survivors, shortcuts known only to those who'd grown up scavenging. But tonight, even familiar ground felt hostile. At one turn, Selene placed her hand against his shoulder, halting him. "What?" Kyle began. Selene tilted her head. "Listen." Kyle stilled. The city groaned with rain and distant thunder, but beneath it, footsteps. Heavy, marching in formation. His blood turned cold. "Soldiers!" Selene's jaw tightened. "They've deployed the Praetors." Kyle frowned. "The who?" Her voice was grim. "Not drones. Not common enforcers. These are handpicked, loyal only to the Council. They hunt until the target is ash." Kyle's stomach sank. "And you didn't think to mention this sooner?" Selene's eyes flicked to him, sharp. "Would it have changed? Your choice?" He opened his mouth, then shut it. No, it wouldn't have, but still, damn her for being right. They ducked into an abandoned tram station. Rusted tracks stretched into darkness, long since dead. Kyle shoved open a bent service door, pulling Selena inside. The space reeked of oil and mold, but it was shelter. For a moment, they leaned against opposite walls, catching their breath. The silence pressed heavy. Finally, Kyle muttered, "This is suicide. You, me, against whatever Praetors are. We won't last the night." Selene didn't argue. She simply pulled a thin chain from beneath her cloak. Hanging from it was a small metallic shard, etched with ancient symbols Kale didn't recognize. It pulsed faintly like a heartbeat. "What's that?" he asked, her voice softened. "A fragment from the core." Kyle frowned. "The core? You mean that old myth about the machine beneath the capital?" Selene's eyes flashed. "Not a myth. A power older than the Empire itself. It sustains our cities, fuels the skyships, breathes life into the towers. Whoever controls the core controls everything." Kyle blinked. "And you stole a piece of it." Her lips curved into something like sorrow. "No, I was given it. By the core itself." Kyle laughed, harsh and disbelieving. "Machines don't give gifts." Selene's gaze held his, steady and unyielding. "This one does." The weight of her words sat heavy between them. Kyle wanted to argue, to dismiss it as madness. But deep down, something in him stirred. A memory of the lights flickering strange colors during storms, of power surges that felt almost alive. Maybe she wasn't lying. Before he could speak, a sharp crack echoed from the station entrance. Boots, dozens of them. Kyle's heart jolted. Selena tucked the fragment away and drew her hood low. Her voice dropped to a whisper. "Stay behind me." Kyle's instincts screamed otherwise. "Stay behind you? You're the one they're hunting." But Selena didn't move. She stood tall, unarmed, as the shadows of armored figures spilled into the station. The Praetors emerged, faceless helmets glowing faintly blue, armor plated and silent despite their size. At their head walked a commander, his armor darker, heavier, a blade strapped across his back. His voice boomed cold and mechanical through his helmet. "Selene of the First Crown, by order of the Council, you are stripped of title and condemned to termination." The words cracked the air like lightning. Kyle's stomach twisted. It was real. Every word she'd said. Celine didn't flinch. Her voice was steady, regal even here in the ruins. I am still the rightful empress. You serve an oath you break with every step. The commander's tone didn't change. The council is the empire. The empire is the council. You are nothing. Kale wanted to scream at her to shut up, to run, to stop drawing fire. But before he could, Celine's hand brushed the shard beneath her cloak. And suddenly, light pulsed through the station. The praetors staggered. Their visors flickered. The rails beneath their feet groaned, sparks dancing across metal. Kyle's eyes widened. What the... Celine's voice rang like iron. The Corps still knows me. The commander snarled, tearing his blade free. Then it will burn with you. Chaos erupted. Praetors charged, weapons flashing. Celine moved like water, unarmed yet untouchable, guiding the surge of flickering power through the station itself. Lights burst, rails screamed, walls shuddered. Kale ducked behind cover, heart slamming. He wasn't a fighter, he was a mechanic. But survival, that he understood. His eyes darted across the station, loose panels, live wires, broken conduits. He grabbed a coil of sparking cable, yanking it free. As a praetor lunged past, Kale jammed the wire against its armor. Sparks exploded. The soldier convulsed, collapsing with a hiss of smoke. Kale's hands trembled, but adrenaline burned away hesitation. He wasn't useless. Not tonight. Selene, meanwhile, stood like a storm given flesh. Every time a praetor neared, the fragment's light flared, bending the environment to her will. Rails buckled, steel screamed, sparks rained. But the commander, he didn't falter. His blade cut through collapsing beams, his stride unbroken. He moved toward her with relentless force. Kyle's chest tightened. She couldn't hold forever. "Celine!" he shouted, voice breaking. "Move!" But she didn't. She faced the commander head-on, shard blazing. The clash that followed shook the station to its bones. Hours later, when silence finally returned, the station lay in ruins. Smoke curled from shattered rails, broken helmets littered the ground. Kyle leaned against a cracked wall, chest burning, every muscle screaming. His hands were bloodied, his clothes scorched. Celine stood nearby, cloak torn, face pale but eyes still fierce. The shard glowed faintly in her grasp. Kyle forced a bitter laugh. "You weren't kidding. This is bigger than both of us." Celine met his gaze. For the first time, her voice wavered. "Bigger than both of us, but not impossible, if you stay." Kyle stared at her. He wanted to walk away, to vanish back into the ruins, to forget this night ever happened. But deep inside, something had shifted. He wasn't just a survivor anymore. He wasn't just running. He was standing, and against all reason, he nodded. "I'll stay." Celine's lips curved, tired, but genuine. Then perhaps the Empire still has a chance. The storm outside the ruined tram station had quieted, but inside Kale's chest, thunder still raged. His muscles ached from the fight, his ears still rang from the clash of metal, and the smell of ozone lingered in his nostrils. Celine moved through the wreckage with measured steps, her cloak tattered but her bearing unbroken. Every movement of hers carried something Kale couldn't name. Command, maybe. Grace. Or the strange gravity of someone who had never once believed they could lose. Kyle forced himself to stand, though his knees wobbled. "We can't stay here. They'll send more." Celine glanced back at him, her hood low, hiding her face in shadow. "You're right, but we can't move blindly. We need a safe path." Kyle almost laughed at the word. Safe. Nothing about tonight or her was safe. Still, he found himself nodding. They moved through the hushed ruins, skirting broken skyways and drowned tunnels. Kyle led, his knowledge of the lower districts their only shield. He had lived in these ruins since he could walk, memorizing shortcuts like prayers, mapping danger with every scar the city gave him. Celine followed, silent and sure-footed though. Kale noticed her shoulders sagging now, her steps heavier. She was tired, she was hurt, but she would never say it aloud. When they finally reached the husk of an old maintenance hub, a place Kyle sometimes used as a hideout, he pried open the rusted door and ushered her inside. It wasn't much. Broken terminals, Oil-stained floors, a few dry corners where the rain hadn't claimed the walls. But it was hidden at least for a few hours. Kyle sank onto a crate, chest heaving. Selene lowered herself more carefully, drawing her cloak around her as though wrapping herself in dignity more than warmth. For a long moment, neither spoke. The only sound was the drip of water through cracks above. Finally, Kyle muttered, "So, you're the Empress." Selene's hood shifted. "I was." He snorted. "That's not the kind of thing you stop being." Her voice softened. "Tell that to the council." Kyle rubbed his face with trembling hands. The weight of it all pressed down on him now that the adrenaline was gone. He'd killed soldiers tonight. Not enforcers, not scavengers. Trained praetors. Men whose armor he'd only ever seen from far below, and all because he'd chosen to help her. He looked up at her, bitterness clawing at his throat. "Why me? Out of everyone in this rotting city, why drag me into this?" Selene's eyes, faintly lit by the glow of a cracked terminal, met his. Calm, unflinching. "Because you chose." Kale barked a hollow laugh. "That's not an answer." "It's the only one that matters." He hated how her words cut through him. Hated how a part of him wanted to believe them. Hours passed. Kyle patched his wounds with torn cloth, muttering curses at every sting. Selene, though scraped and bruised, refused his clumsy offer of help. Instead, she sat cross-legged, the shard of the core resting in her palm, its faint pulse painting her face in pale light. Kale watched her, unease gnawing at him. "That thing, it scares me." Selene's lips curved faintly. "It should. The core isn't meant for mortal hands. But it knows me, and I..." She hesitated, just for a breath. "I know it." Kyle shook his head. "Machines don't know people." Selene's gaze flicked to him, sharp but not unkind. "And yet you speak to engines as if they were friends, don't you?" Kyle stiffened. She'd noticed. He didn't answer, but the truth stung. He'd always felt machines breathing around him, whispering in sparks and clicks. Not alive, not exactly, but not dead either. Selene closed her hand around the shard. "The core is alive in ways you can't imagine. It remembers, and it remembers me." Kale wanted to argue, but exhaustion dulled the fight in him. He slumped back against the wall, eyes closing. "Whatever you say, Empress." The last thing he heard before sleep claimed him was her quiet reply. Just Selene. When Kale woke, the faint glow of dawn crept through cracks in the ceiling. Selena was still awake, standing by the door, her cloak drawn tight. "You didn't sleep?" Kale asked, his voice rough. Her eyes lingered on the ruined skyline outside. "I couldn't. Dreams are dangerous when the council hunts you." Kale stood, stretching sore muscles. "Then we need to move. If the praetors tracked us once, they'll do it again." Selena nodded. "Agreed. But we need more than running. We need allies." Kale barked a laugh. "Allies? In this district? Everyone down here would sell us for a week's rations." "Not everyone," Selena said softly. "There are still those who remember what the Empire was meant to be. Those who resist." Kyle frowned. "You mean the underground?" Selene's eyes flicked to him, surprised. "You know of them," Kyle shrugged. "You grow up here, you hear whispers. Ghost networks, cells hiding in the ruins, planning to strike back. But no one ever sees them. For all I know, they're just stories." Her voice was firm. "They're real, and we need to find them." Kyle rubbed his temples. "Great. So we're not just running from praetors. We're walking into the arms of rebel ghosts." Selene's gaze sharpened. "Do you want to survive, Kyle? Or do you want to live?" The question stung. He muttered a curse, then grabbed his tools and slung them over his shoulder. "Fine. Lead the way, Empress." Selene's lips curved faintly. Selene. Their path took them deeper into the ruins than Kyle had ever dared. Through drowned chambers where water whispered of things long dead, across collapsed bridges where one wrong step meant a plunge into darkness. Everywhere the city bore scars of war, walls blackened by fire, towers cleaved in half, bones of machines rusting where they'd fallen. And yet Selene moved with certainty, as though she had walked these paths long before. At last they reached a chamber hidden beneath a collapsed temple. The air was heavy with dust and silence. Selene stepped forward, her voice low but commanding. "I know you're here." For a moment, nothing. Then shadows moved. Figures emerged from the dark, faces masked, weapons raised. The underground. Cale's hand twitched toward his wrench, but Selene lifted a hand, steady. "I am Selene of the First Crown," she said, her voice carrying a weight that filled the chamber. "I seek your aid." The rebels stirred, their masks shifting, their whispers hissing. One stepped forward, lowering his hood. His eyes were sharp, suspicious, but not unkind. "Selene is dead," he said flatly. The council made sure of it. Selene's gaze didn't waver. She lifted the shard from her cloak, its faint pulse painting the chamber in pale light. The rebels froze. Even Cale felt the air shift, heavy, alive. Selene's voice rang like iron. "I am not dead, and with the core, neither is the Empire." For the first time since the night began, Cale saw something he hadn't expected. Hope. It flickered in the eyes of the rebels, small but real, and Cale realized with a sinking weight in his chest that there was no going back. Not for him, not for her, not for any of them. The chamber buzzed with whispers, the pulse of the core's shard painting jagged shadows across stone walls. Cale stood stiff at Selene's side, his hand never straying far from the wrench at his belt. The rebels circled them like wolves, their suspicion a weight in the air. The man who had spoken earlier, sharp-eyed, scar tracing his jaw, stepped closer. "If you're truly Selene, prove it. The council parades doubles all the time. A shard can be stolen. Words can be forged." Selene's gaze didn't waver. "The core answers only to blood bound by oath." With deliberate calm, she raised the shard, pressing it against her palm. The air crackled. Light bled from the wound as the shard sank, fusing into her skin. A hum rolled through the chamber, low and resonant, rattling old stone. Kyle flinched back. The rebels gasped. Selene's voice rang with quiet finality. "I am the last heir of the First Crown. If you doubt me still, strike now, and learn what it means to defy truth." Silence followed, heavy as a tomb. Then slowly the scarred man lowered his blade. "The blood still breathes," he murmured. His voice carried awe he didn't mean to show. "By the old stars, the Empress lives." The rebels dropped to one knee, a wave of submission Selene neither encouraged nor denied. Kyle shifted uncomfortably, watching as she stood tall among them. For the first time he saw her not as a fugitive, not as a woman fighting to survive, but as something more. As someone born to command. Later in the underground's hidden sanctum, the rebels gathered around a fire pit lit by scavenged fuel. Masks off, faces showed hunger, weariness, but also the hard edge of survival. They were soldiers without banners, clinging to scraps of loyalty in a world that had forgotten them. Selene sat at the center, cloak drawn but head high. Kyle lingered at the edges, watching, listening. The scarred leader introduced himself as Darius. Once, he had been a captain of the Praetors. His betrayal of the council had cost him everything: family, rank, even his name on official records. Now he was a ghost who trained ghosts. "You ask for our aid," Darius said, his voice gravel. "But aid for what? What could one empress, a mechanic, and a splinter of the core do against the full weight of the council?" Selene's eyes gleamed. Not splinter. Seed. Confusion flickered across faces. "The shard I carry is not broken," Selene continued. "It is alive. If returned to the heart of the core, it will awaken the machine fully again. And with the core awake, the council will lose everything they have stolen." The rebels stirred. Whispers, hope tangled with fear. Cale finally spoke, his voice flat. "Sounds like a good way to get killed." Darius glanced at him, then back to Selene. "And you'd trust this mechanic?" Selene's lips curved faintly. "I already do." Kyle stiffened, heat rushing to his face. He wanted to argue, but words jammed in his throat. Darius's frown deepened, but he said nothing. That night, Kyle couldn't sleep. He sat apart from the fire, tools scattered in front of him, pretending to work on a broken comlink. But really he was listening. The rebels whispered of the Empress, of the core, of vengeance. Hope sparked in their voices, fragile but real, And Kale hated it. Hope was dangerous. Hope made people do stupid things. He'd seen whole families die chasing rumors of salvation. He couldn't stand the thought of being dragged into another fool's dream. Yet when he looked at Celine, sitting among them, eyes heavy but unbroken, he felt something dangerous stirring in his own chest. Not hope, not yet, but something close. 3 days passed underground. The rebels shared what little they had: stale bread, water filtered through rusted pipes, a map drawn on scraps of metal. Kyle repaired weapons, patched power cells, rewired drones. Work kept his hands busy, his mind distracted. But Celine, she grew restless. One evening she cornered Kyle while he was bent over a drone's cracked lens. "We can't stay here," she said. Kyle didn't look up. "We're alive here. That's more than we'll be if we run headfirst at the council." Her tone sharpened. "Survival is not living." Kyle slammed his tool down, sparks jumping. "And what's the alternative? March into the heart, wave your shard around, and expect the council to kneel. They'll slaughter us before we take 2 steps. Celine leaned closer, her voice dropping, intimate and fierce. "Do you think I don't know the cost? Do you think I haven't bled for every step I've taken since they tore the crown from me?" Kyle finally met her eyes. Fire burned there, raw and unyielding. For a moment he saw not an empress, not a fugitive, just a woman who refused to break, and he hated that it made him want to believe her. Before he could answer, alarms shrieked through the chamber. Chaos erupted. Rebels scrambled for weapons, Darius barking orders. The tunnels shook as explosions thundered overhead. Dust rained from the ceiling. Kyle's stomach dropped. "They found us," Darius cursed. "The praetors must have tracked the shard's pulse. We need to move, now." Celine stood, cloak flaring. "No. If we scatter, they'll hunt us down piece by piece. We fight together or we don't fight at all." Kyle stared at her, horrified. "Fight? Against them? There are dozens, maybe hundreds." Celine's hand tightened around the shard. Light pulsed between her fingers, brighter than before. "Then we make them bleed for every step." The tunnels became a battlefield. Praetors poured in, their black armor gleaming, rifles spitting fire. Rebels met them with salvaged blades, patched rifles, desperation. Kyle fought like a man possessed, wrench-cracking helmets, drones sparking under his command. He had never killed so many, never seen so much blood, but the alternative was death. Through it all, Celine moved like a storm. The shard in her palm flared, and machines around them stirred. Doors sealing, drones turning on their masters, walls groaning as though the ruins themselves fought for her. For a moment, Kale thought they might win. Then the ground shook. From the smoke emerged a figure larger than any praetor, armor forged in black steel, visor glowing red. His voice boomed through a speaker. "Celine of the First Crown. By order of the council, your life ends here." Darius cursed. An arch-praetor. Kyle's blood ran cold. He had heard stories. These were no ordinary soldiers. They were executioners. Legends whispered to terrify children. Celine stepped forward, unflinching. "If you want my life," she said, her voice ringing clear even in the chaos, "you'll have to take it from my hands." The arch-praetor raised his blade, a weapon taller than Kale. "Gladly." And the chamber exploded in light and steel,